Hello, I'm Rosella and welcome to my craft room. So today we're going to make this little Kraft Tex bag. So this is a project that I was unfamiliar with until last week, and it's a paper product, but it acts a little bit like fabric as well, in that you can stitch it, you can wash it, you can dry it, you can iron it, you can use it for mixed media, you can sew on it, stamp on it, stitch on it. It's really versatile, and I wanted to have a bit of a play making a bag with it, so I thought that as I was playing, you might like to come along on this journey with me. So what I've created is this little tote bag, and you've got a couple of pockets in there, a really pretty lining, and then we finish off with a little corsage just to decorate. So watch along, see how we get on. So I've got my fabric ready, and for the outer bag I've got a sheet that is 9.5 by 19 inches. You can change these if you've got a fat quarter, cut it in half maybe. And we've got lining of the same size, 9.5 by 19. We've got bag handles, and I'm using the fabric for these rather than the Kraft Tex, and that is at 2.5 by 13.5. And then I've got pockets, and I'm using Kraft Tex for the pockets as well. I've got two pockets, and again, you can resize these as you wish, but I've chosen 6.25 by 4 and 4 by 4. And we need to start putting it together. So the first thing I'm actually going to do is I'm going to put some interfacing just to stiffen my lining fabric. The reason I'm doing that is because I'm using the Kraft Tex as my pockets. If I was just using fabric, then it's not entirely necessary, it's your choice then, but because this is quite sturdy, I think it'll make the lining sag a little bit. So I'm just going to put some iron-on interfacing onto that. So I've got the interfacing on my lining. You can see it's a bit short and it's a bit scrappy, but it was a piece that I actually had pre-cut. I'm happy for it to be a little bit short at the edges because it's just going to help with turning. So we've got the Kraft Tex to turn and the lining fabric. And then the next thing to do is our handles. And again, a little bit of interfacing in there. And I'm leaving it clear at the sides again because we're going to fold it all in and it doesn't need as much. So I'm just going to pop and iron that on. To make the handles, I'm going to iron about 1/4 inch up each side of each handle. Bowser's found something to bark at. A blade of grass or wind. And then all I need to do then is fold them in half so that those sides meet. It's still barking. It's not anything special, I can tell from his bark. It's like, oh, somebody come out and play. There we go, and then I'm going to stitch down this side and down this side just to reinforce them and make it nice and neat and tidy, and do the same on the other side. Now our handles are complete, we can put our pockets on our lining fabric. So what I would do is I'd fold it up, because that's what our tote bag, that's the size it's going to be, which is great, and decide where you'd like the pockets. So I'm going to centralize them, she says with confidence. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold my fabric in half and give it a bit of a pinch. So that's the centre of my fabric. If I've just put a little line there, you might be able to see it easier. So that's the centre of my fabric, and This is the larger of the pockets. I'm going to do the same with that. Little pinch, and then it's going to go on. Now bear in mind you've got your seam allowance there, so let's say about 1/2 inch, and you want to have room to put your hand in your pocket. If you just fold that up so that you can see where the bottom of the bag is, and maybe even a little bit lower, still lining up the center with the center of that. And then what we can do, we don't need to sort of turn the pocket at all because it's Kraft Tex, it's not going to fray. But what we do need to do is make sure it's straight. So I'm just going to use my ruler on my straight edge there and just butt the pocket up to it to make sure it is straight. And again, you could centralize it using the ruler. Now, I don't want to pin the Kraft Tex, because if I pin it, it was going to put holes in it. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to use a little bit of double-sided tape, quilter's tape, to hold it in place, and it's going to be at the sides where the seams are anyway. Talk amongst yourselves whilst I get this backing off. There we go. Again, let's just make sure it's nice and level before I lay it down. That's one side, and then we'll need a little bit on this side. There we go. And then I can stitch around 3 sides on here. Now with the Kraft Tex, when you're stitching, I'm going to back stitch ever so slightly, but I'm going to do it on the fabric, and then I've only got one line of stitching all the way around, because so I'm going to start sort of up here. I don't want to stitch through too many times because I don't want to risk it actually splitting. And let's do the same with the other side. So I begin by halving the fabric, just pinch it to find the center. Again, we can pop a little mark on that. It's the same colour as the fabric, so that's not very bright, is it? Never mind. And again, the same with my pocket. Let's just find the centre. You don't have to have it at the centre, you could have it at the side, it wouldn't matter. And decide how far down you want it. 2 1/4 is fine. A little bit of tape just to hold it into position whilst we stitch it. One side. Now if you feel you're going to put something in your pocket where the sticky might become attached to it, make sure that when you stitch it, you stitch that side of the tape. So I'm ready to go ahead now and stitch those on. And there we've got our pockets on. Make sure that when your lining's like that, your pockets are actually facing the right way up, not upside down. Okay, I'm just going to trim those ends off and then we'll continue. So I'm going to set the handles in, and I'm going to set them in 2 inches from the edge. So I'm going to line up the raw edges of my handle with the raw edges at the top of the bag, and I'm going to pin it in place. I'm okay pinning in place because I'm pinning to the fabric, not the Kraft Tex, remember. And then I'm actually going to pin, actually that's a little bit too far forward. I'm going to pin a little bit further down so that when I'm stitching them on, my handle doesn't swing to the side. And then you want to make sure that your handle's facing the right direction. So if that was the top of your bag, you'd want it to turn around to that. And again, I'm going to pin 2 inches from this side. So I'm going to stitch just within the seam allowance and put the handle on the other side exactly the same. So I've got my handles attached. I'm going to leave these pins in, the lower pins, just whilst I stitch the front to the back, and it's just going to keep my handles under control there. And I'm going to attach the front to the back, and I'm going to clip it this time with some quilting clips, not pins, because pins will perforate the Kraft Tex. And then with about a 1/2 inch seam allowance, I'm going to stitch down this side, which is the short edge, and I'm going to do the same at this edge as well. And then now we can take out those pins because the handles should be under control, and you can see they're actually coming out the top of the bag, which is always a bonus. What we need to do now is to open it out, so that we've got the 2 centre seams. Actually, just let's get rid of those threads because they're only going to get in the way. And same at this side. I'm using stitch length of about 3 on the Kraft Tex. Now what I'm going to do, no I'm not, I was going to move these seams to one side, but actually they're on the lining side. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So matching up those seams, you need to then pin all the way along, or not pin, don't pin, I've said that, clip all the way along your Kraft Tex right to the end. Oops, where's my clip? It's disappeared. I don't know where that one went. Let's find another one. Oh, I can see it now. There it is, it's hiding. And the same at this side. matching up those two seams. Now remember, when you are beginning and ending your stitching with your Kraft Tex, you can go over a couple of times, but don't go over any more. And then when it comes to your lining piece, one side you can sew all the way up. So let's clip that as well. Okay. The other side, we need to leave a turning gap. So I would, make sure that's straight, stitch from the bottom a little way. Because you're turning Kraft Tex through, I found that it's a little bit trickier than turning fabric, so leave a larger turning gap. It's in your lining anyway, it's not going to show on the outside of your bag, so there's no reason not to leave a really large gap. I would stitch just at the corner because that's sort of tricky to fold under if you want to fold it under, and then just at the top here where it joins your Kraft Tex, and I would leave the rest of it open. So I'm just going to stitch down that now. Again, I'm going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance. There we go. So it's all stitched and I've got a nice large turning gap there. And so all I need to do is to trim my threads and turn it through. So we've got it turned through, and what we need to do now is we just need to iron our lining under and then stitched it closed. Now because it's in the lining, I'm just going to stitch it closed with my machine once I've ironed it. And then at this point, I'm going to tuck my lining inside. There we go. And because we pressed those seam allowances from the Kraft Tex towards the lining, can you see we've got that little border around? So I'm just at this stage, I'm just going to press my bag and make it look nice. So now that that's nice and pressed around the top there, I'm just going to top stitch just below the just above the seam there, just to hold that rolled lining in place. There we go, and we'll just cut off those loose ends. It's looking really pretty. So I'm really happy with my first make with Kraft Tex as a bag, and all I think it needs now is a little bit of decoration. So I've actually die cut some flowers, but you could just cut round. So I'm thinking probably, let me just say, 2 of those, 1 of those, or 3 of those. Oh no, I think more, 3 in the same fabric, which is pretty much all I had left. And then a lovely little self-covered button to go on the top. So I'm just going to attach those. And there we have it. So I've enjoyed using the Kraft Tex. I think it's something a little bit different, and I hope you've enjoyed making this project too. I really do appreciate you joining me in my craft room, and I appreciate your support on YouTube. And if you haven't subscribed, please do, that would be really great. And enjoy.